There's a saying in the outer colonies, when the arrows fall like rain, find the human and stand behind them. Today's story isn't about conquest or glory or heroes in shining armor. It's about one woman, Lieutenant Mara Voss, who found herself on an alien world, outnumbered, bleeding, and afraid, and chose to stand her ground anyway. It's a story that began as a battlefield report, became a legend among predators, and ended as a lesson for all of us about what it means to be human. So settle in. This is the story of arrows fell like rain. The humans shielded the predator cubs and did not move. A story of fear, of courage, and of the moment one person decided not to move. The arrows fell like rain. They hissed through the violet air of Cathara IV, burning silver streaks that split the twilight forest like shards of lightning. The sound came before the pain, and by the time Lieutenant Mara Voss hit the dirt, the mission was already over. This was not how first contact missions were supposed to end. 12 years in the Terran Expeditionary Fleet had taken her from the glass moons of Epsilon Theta to the dust storms of forgotten colonies. She had seen stars born in silence and civilizations die screaming. But none of it had prepared her for the crimson forests of Cathara IV, a world the locals called Teatrine Vera, the Heartwood, a place as breathtaking as it was lethal, where every root whispered hunger and every breeze carried the scent of iron. Mara had come here as a linguist, not a soldier, a translator for the Festival of First Hunt, a ritual where the young of the KTH, an apex predator species, took their first prey under the gaze of their elders. It was supposed to be peace, a ceremony, a bridge between worlds. But on Cathara IV, peace lasted exactly 27 minutes. The blood roar came with fire and teeth and hatred older than stars. They were KTH too, but wild ones. Traditionalists who spat on the coalition's treaties and saw humans as corruption in flesh. And when they struck like the planet itself had decided to kill. The first arrow tore through the song of the ceremony. The second split a guard's throat mid-chant. By the third, the forest was screaming. Mara's comms went dead as she dove for cover behind a root the size of a tank tread. She could smell blood in the air, hers and others, the copper tang of war returning like an old ghost. She blinked away the dizziness, checking her sidearm. Half charge. No backup. The trees burned crimson in the twin suns as the sky filled with smoke and death. Then she heard it. Not the roar of warriors, not the crash of battle, but something small, something fragile. A whimper. She followed the sound through the haze and found them. 3 KTH cubs, no older than 5 cycles, huddled in a shallow ravine. Their guide was dead beside them, his back a forest of arrows. The smallest cub trembled so hard his claws scratched the dirt. And the eldest, Taran, bared his fangs at her. "Stay back, alien," he hissed, voice trembling, half growl, half child. Mara raised her empty hands. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said softly. "I'm here to help." The cub glared, fur bristling, blood streaking his snout. "We do not need your protection, Softkin. We are hunters." "Not right now," she whispered. "Right now, you're just children." And above them, the forest whispered with the sound of drawn bows. She looked back at the ravine's mouth. No exits. One entrance. 3 cubs. 1 half-charged pistol. Her training did the math. Then she holstered the weapon. "Get behind me," she said. The command wasn't loud, but it carried something ancient, something that made predators pause and children obey. They pressed against the wall, trembling, and Mara Voss, translator, not warrior, stepped forward into the mouth of the ravine. She braced her boots into the soil and raised her arms wide. The first blood roar appeared, a veteran female with scars crossing her face and eyes like molten coins. She drew her bow with a predator's grace and spoke. "Move aside, Softskin. This is KTH business." Mara's voice didn't shake. "Then it's coalition business. I can't let you harm them." The warrior tilted her head. "Then you will die with them." And the arrow flew. The shaft hit her shoulder, spinning her slightly. Pain seared through muscle and bone, but she didn't fall. A second arrow hit her thigh. A third shattered on her chest plate. She tasted blood and salt and fear, but still she stood. Behind her, Taran whispered, panicked. "She's dying. We must run." Mara gasped, the words tearing out of her throat. "No. Stay behind me." The blood roar reloaded. Their leader frowned. "Why do you not fall, human?" Mara smiled through blood and pain. Because they're behind me, she said. And I don't move. The arrows fell like rain, each one a whisper of death, each one a defiance of it. And through it all, she did not move. In that moment, a legend was born on Cathara IV, the kind that would outlive names, ranks, and bloodlines. A story not about killing, but about standing. And as the rain of arrows became her storm to bear, the universe held its breath. Because for the first time in KTH memory, a human had stood against the hunt. Mara Voss stood in the ravine as the arrows tore through the air. Each impact drove her deeper into pain, but she refused to fall. The cubs behind her trembled, their wide amber eyes fixed on the human who would not yield. When the blood roar finally stopped firing, silence pressed down like a physical weight. Smoke drifted through the trees. The leader of the ambush stepped closer, bow drawn low, studying the human who bled but stood. "You should be dead," she said. Mara forced a breath through clenched teeth. "I'm not that easy to kill." The warrior bared her teeth. "You protect prey. You shame the hunt." Mara's voice came out rough but steady. "Then be shamed." The blood roar hissed in unison. One drew a blade. Another notched a fresh arrow. But before they could strike again, the forest shuddered with a distant roar. It wasn't an animal this time. It was engines. Coalition dropships breaking atmosphere. The blood roar hesitated. The scarred leader looked to the sky, snarled, and signaled retreat. The raiders vanished into the trees, their movements silent, leaving behind the wreckage of a massacre. Mara exhaled, her legs shaking beneath her. She turned her head enough to see the cubs pressed together, eyes wide. "It's over," she whispered. Then the world tilted, and darkness claimed her. When she opened her eyes again, the air smelled of antiseptic and ozone. White light filled her vision. Machines hummed softly around her. She tried to move, but her body refused. A voice spoke nearby, calm and measured. "Lieutenant Mara Voss, you're safe." A human doctor leaned over her, tablet in hand. 43 arrow wounds. 17 of them should have been fatal. But you made it. Mara's voice cracked. "The cubs? Alive. All three. Coalition security found them behind you when the drop teams landed." She closed her eyes, a single tear escaping down her cheek. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to rest. 3 days later, she woke to a different kind of silence. The machines still hummed, but the ache in her body had dulled to something almost distant. She sat up slowly, wincing, and saw the door slide open. Turan entered, small but standing tall. His fur was brushed clean, his wounds bandaged. Behind him waited 2 adult KTH, their bearing regal and solemn, his parents. Turan carried something wrapped in red cloth. His golden eyes met hers, and for the first time, there was no fear in them. "My people have a saying," he said, "that true strength is not in the hunt, but in the stand. You taught me this, Lieutenant Voss." He unwrapped the cloth and revealed a blade. The metal was curved and ceremonial, its hilt bound in dark leather. "Among the KTH, we honor those who protect the pack above themselves. You are no longer soft-skin. You are Vmar, mother of the brave." He bowed, lowering his head until his forehead nearly touched her blanket. Mara stared at the blade, speechless. "I just did what anyone would do." Turan looked up, eyes steady. "No, you did what only a human would do. You did not move." He placed the blade across her lap, then stepped back, his parents watching with silent pride. For the first time, Mara felt the weight of something larger than duty settle in her chest. She had come to translate words. Instead, she had spoken a language older than any dialect: sacrifice. In the following days, messages flooded in. From Coalition Command, from the KTH Council, from soldiers she had never met. Her stand had become a symbol. The footage from the dropship's cameras had spread across the network. A lone human, arms outstretched, arrows striking her again and again while she shielded alien children. They called it the Stand of the Ravine. Reporters wanted interviews. Command wanted debriefs. The KTH wanted to make her name part of their songs. Mara wanted silence. When she was strong enough to walk, she was summoned to the capital enclave carved into the cliffs overlooking the Heartwood Valley. The halls shimmered with a blend of Terran metal and KTH stone, a fragile harmony of 2 worlds trying to believe in peace. Ambassador Threen met her at the entrance. Once polished and distant, now he bowed low. "Lieutenant Voss, You've done more for interspecies trust in one act than any treaty in the last decade. I just tried to keep 3 kids alive, she said quietly. That's exactly why it matters, Threen replied. When you stood in that ravine, the blood roar saw a human defy them. But the KTH saw something else, an echo of their own legends. Every cub in the Heartwood knows your name now. Legends don't bleed, she said. People do. Maybe, he said. But legends make people believe. Later, she stood before the Council of Clans. Massive KTH elders surrounded her in a circle of firelight and shadow. The air smelled of resin and smoke. Taran stood in the center, wrapped in a crimson sash. The eldest KTH spoke, her mane streaked silver. Lieutenant Mara Voss. In our tongue, you are Vmar Thersh, the mother of the brave. Your stand in the ravine of the first hunt has entered our songs. From this day forth, the young will speak your name before they hunt, not in reverence of prey, but in remembrance of courage. Mara lowered her gaze, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. The matriarch's deep voice rumbled. Say nothing. You already spoke with your actions. Taran stepped forward. My people used to believe strength came only from dominance, from who could kill faster. But when the arrows fell like rain, you showed us another kind of strength. You stood so others didn't have to. He turned to the elders. If the blood roars still live, let them hear this. The future will not belong to those who strike from the shadows, but to those who stand in the light. The elders rumbled their approval, a sound like distant thunder. For the first time since the chaos of Cathara IV, Mara felt something she had almost forgotten: peace. That night, she returned to her quarters overlooking the valley. The crimson forest shimmered under twin suns. Dropships moved through the sky like silent guardians. She touched the hilt of the KTH blade resting by her bed and thought of the ravine, the arrows, and the cubs who lived. She had come here to bridge words. But her actions had built something far stronger. On Cathara IV, among predators and prey, courage had found a new name. They called it human. The days that followed turned Cathara IV into a world divided between memory and myth. Across the crimson forests, KTH children sang songs of the human who stood against the rain of arrows. Among the coalition, Mara Voss became the name whispered in recruitment halls, the face printed on morale banners. She hated every second of it. She hadn't stood for glory. She had stood because no one else could. Still, the legend grew. As her body healed, Mara found herself pulled into councils and ceremonies. The KTH elders wanted her to speak at their conclaves. The coalition wanted her to record tactical briefings about her encounter with the blood roar. She gave them all the same answer. I stood because there were children behind me. That's all. But the universe rarely listens to simplicity. In time, the blood roar returned, not in full strength, but in fragments, raiding camps and villages across the Heartwood. Their attacks were desperate, scattered, but they carried one cruel message: the war was not over. Mara was still recovering when the first reports arrived. She could have stayed behind, accepted her commendations, and let others fight. But she didn't. She requested redeployment. The command staff hesitated. You nearly died once, they told her. She replied, then I know what to expect. She returned to the forest she had nearly died in, now wearing new armor, stronger plates, reinforced joints, and the crest of both the Terran fleet and the Cage clans etched into her shoulder. With her marched a new kind of unit. Humans and KTH side by side. Soldiers who spoke each other's languages. Warriors who trained under both banners. They called themselves the Shield Line. Their motto was simple: we do not move. The first time the blood roar saw them, they hesitated. They had expected humans to cower and the KTH to divide. Instead, they found a wall of resolve, a united front that did not flinch when the arrows came. The fighting was brief but brutal. The shield line held, their formation modeled after the ravine where Mara had made her stand. Each fighter took an oath before battle, repeating her words like prayer. Because they're behind me, and I don't move. When the smoke cleared, the blood roar were broken. Those who survived fled into the deep woods. After the battle, Mara stood among the fallen. She looked down at the soil darkened by blood, human and KTH alike, and felt the weight of every loss. Victory had never felt so heavy. Taran approached her, taller now, wearing light armor marked with the crest of his clan. They will tell stories of this day too, he said. Mara shook her head. No, let them tell stories of peace for once. He gave a faint smile. Peace does not inspire warriors. Then maybe it should, she said. Over the next cycles, the coalition established a joint academy on Cathara IV. Humans and KTH trained together, learning from one another. Mara was asked to oversee its creation. She accepted, on one condition, that the program's purpose be defense, not conquest. The academy rose on the cliffs above the Heartwood Valley. Its banners bore a simple emblem, a human hand and a KTH claw, locked together, crossed by 3 arrows. Under it were the words she had spoken in that ravine, "We do not move." At the inauguration, Ambassador Threen spoke of unity, of courage that transcended species. But when he invited Mara to the podium, she hesitated. She was no orator, no diplomat, just a soldier who had refused to step aside. She took the stage anyway. "I've been called a hero," she began. "I've been told I changed how 2 species see each other. But the truth is, I just stood where no one else could. I didn't move because I couldn't bear to watch others fall. If that's heroism, then every soldier in this room carries it." She paused, scanning the crowd. Hundreds of faces, human and KTH alike. "We talk about bravery like it's something rare. It's not. Bravery is a choice. It's standing when falling is easier. It's putting yourself between danger and those who can't fight back. If we can all do that, then maybe this alliance will mean something." Silence followed. Then a low rumble began among the KTH, joined by human applause. A harmony of 2 species united not by treaty, but by conviction. Later, Turan found her overlooking the valley. The twin suns were setting, bathing the crimson forest in light. "I think you were right," he said. "About what? Peace can inspire warriors too. They just need the right story." She smiled faintly. "Then tell it better than I can." "I will," he said. "But it won't be mine. It will be ours." They stood in silence, watching the shadows stretch across the trees. Mara thought of the ravine, the smell of blood and soil, the hiss of arrows, the cubs pressed against the wall. She could still feel the weight of that day in her bones. But now, that weight had purpose. Across the galaxy, the story spread, not as propaganda, but as memory. The image of one human standing in a storm of arrows became a symbol of unity for every world that doubted the coalition. For the first time, the universe began to understand what it meant to be human. Not a conqueror, not a savior, but a shield. And that shield did not move. Years passed on Cathara IV. The forests healed faster than the people who fought in them. Charred roots gave way to new growth, and the crimson canopy shimmered once more beneath the twin suns. But for Mara Voss, peace never came easily. The galaxy called her a hero. The KTH called her mother of the brave. Her name was etched into stone halls, sung in the hunting songs of children, and printed across every coalition broadcast. Yet inside, she felt like an echo, alive, but hollowed by what she had seen. Every morning, she touched the scar on her abdomen where an arrow had slipped past her armor. The doctors had told her it would fade. She wasn't sure she wanted it to. Some scars, she thought, are reminders of what must never be forgotten. The Intercultural Defense Initiative grew faster than anyone expected. Recruits from 50 worlds came to learn the new doctrine, one built not on domination but on protection. They called themselves peacekeepers, but Mara knew better. They were shields given form. Among them were humans and KTH, working side by side. They sparred, they laughed, they argued. They learned how to trust. For the first time in generations, predator and prey were training for the same purpose. And at the heart of it all stood Mara, watching it unfold with quiet pride. One afternoon, she found Turan in the training yard. He was older now, his frame filled with strength, his movements graceful and deliberate. The cub she had once shielded had become a warrior in his own right. He noticed her and saluted with the curved blade she had once carried. "Vmar," he said with a grin. "You still check up on your cubs." "Old habits die hard," she replied. "Besides, I like to make sure you don't embarrass me in front of the recruits." He laughed, the deep rumbling sound uniquely KTH. "You've become a legend, Mara. The young speak your name before every mission. Do you realize what that means?" "It means they need better heroes," she said softly. He frowned. "You don't believe in legends?" "I believe in people," she said. "Legends forget the pain. They turn choices into fairy tales. But courage, it's not magic. It's blood and fear and staying upright when you want to collapse. That's all. Taran considered her words, then nodded slowly. Then maybe we need legends that remember the pain. Not long after, the Coalition Council summoned her to the Galactic Core. There, she stood before admirals, ambassadors, and elders who spoke of policy, strategy, and unity. They offered her another promotion. Director, Commander, a seat among the architects of peace. She accepted, but only under one condition, that every academy under her command would teach one lesson above all others: empathy as defense. Strength through understanding. Back on Cathara IV, statues rose where she had once fallen. At the mouth of the ravine, KTH artisans carved her likeness, arms spread wide, shielding 3 cubs. Beneath it, in both KTH and Galactic Common, were the words, "She did not move." Mara visited it alone. She traced the carvings, remembering the weight of the arrows, the smell of blood and soil, the sound of terrified breathing behind her. It all came rushing back, vivid and sharp. A shadow moved behind her. She turned and saw Taran, now in full command armor. He carried himself with quiet confidence. "I thought I'd find you here," he said. "Old soldiers have trouble letting go of battlefields," she replied. He stood beside her, gazing up at the monument. "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened?" She hesitated. "Every time I dream. But then I remember what came from it. And no, I don't wish it away." Taran nodded. "Your stand changed us. It changed me. The young no longer see humans as soft skins. They see kin." "Kin?" she asked, a faint smile touching her lips. "Yes, different in body, but the same in spirit." He turned to her, his amber eyes bright. "Because you taught us that true strength isn't found in dominance. It's found in standing for others." Mara looked out over the forest. "And you taught us that instincts aren't destiny, that even predators can choose compassion." They stood in silence for a while, the wind whispering through the crimson leaves. When the sun dipped low, Taran spoke again. "I still hear your voice, you know. Every time fear takes hold in battle, I remember your words, 'Stay behind me.'" It became doctrine. Mara smiled. "I hope they teach you better doctrine than that." He shook his head. "It wasn't about hiding. It was about faith, that someone will stand when others cannot." Her eyes softened. "You've become more than a warrior, Taran. You've become what the KTH needed, a leader who remembers. And you," he said, "became what the galaxy needed, a legend who bleeds." Mara chuckled quietly. That's one way to put it. Together they watched the horizon fade into violet twilight. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air was still, the forest alive with faint, distant calls. Mara thought about how far they had come. 2 species that had once eyed each other across the stars, now united by a single act of defiance. The legend of the ravine had spread to worlds she would never see. On distant colonies, children whispered it before sleep. Soldiers etched her words into their armor. Even on Earth, the newsfeed spoke of the human who had stood against the storm. But to Mara, it was never about fame. It was about survival. About the moment when standing meant everything. That night, she returned to her quarters and wrote in her personal log. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to surrender to it. When the moment comes and the arrows fall, remember, you don't need to strike hardest. You only need to stand the longest." She sealed the entry, unsure if anyone would ever read it. Outside, the twin suns sank beyond the forest line, and the crimson trees whispered in the wind. For a heartbeat, she thought she could hear her own voice carried through the leaves, mingling with the chants of caged children learning her story. And for the first time in years, Mara Voss smiled. Not because she had survived, but because what she stood for had endured. Years turned into decades. The galaxy changed, as galaxies always do. Wars cooled into treaties. Empires fell into silence. But the story of the stand in the ravine, of the human who shielded the predator cubs and did not move, only grew louder. On Cathara IV, under the red canopy of the Heartwood Forest, young Cage still gathered around campfires, claws tapping rhythm on stone as elders told the tale. They spoke of Lieutenant Mara Voss, the soft skin who faced the storm of arrows and became the mother of the brave. But Mara herself had grown old. Her hair had silvered, her step had slowed, yet her eyes remained sharp, eyes that had seen both cruelty and compassion written across the stars. She had lived to see the Intercultural Defense Initiative become something greater than she ever imagined, an alliance of soldiers, healers, translators, and guardians. They called themselves the Unmoving Guard, and across 50 worlds, their symbol gleamed, a stylized human silhouette standing before a trio of falling arrows. The motto beneath it read simply, "We do not move." When new recruits graduated, they recited her words, not as a pledge of violence, but as a vow of empathy. Mara traveled from world to world, advising, teaching, reminding leaders of what courage truly meant. But she always returned to Cathara IV, to the place where everything began. The ravine had changed again. What was once blood-soaked soil was now a sanctuary. Trees bowed inward, their branches forming a natural cathedral. At the center stood the statue, the human shield and the cubs she had protected. Moss had crept along its base, and small braids of red and gold fiber hung from its arms, offerings from those who came to pay respect. Taran met her there, older now, his mane streaked with gray, his presence calm and unyielding. "Mara," he greeted her, his deep voice softened by years. "The forest remembered you before I could." She smiled. "And you, Commander Taran, look like you finally learned to rest." He gave a low laugh. "Rest is for those who have finished their work. I am not yet done." "Neither am I," she said quietly. They stood together beneath the twin suns, the light filtering down in shifting patterns of violet and gold. Taran turned to her. "The young still tell your story, but I wonder, do they understand it?" Mara tilted her head. "What do they say?" "They say you were fearless, that you stood without hesitation. That pain meant nothing to you." She chuckled softly. "Then they understand nothing. I was terrified, Taran. Every second of it. The only reason I didn't run was because those cubs couldn't. Courage isn't fearlessness. It's the decision that someone else's life matters more than your own comfort." Taran nodded. "Then I will make sure they know that truth. The legend must remain honest." As dusk fell, the forest came alive with quiet hums, KTH voices singing the song of the stand. The sound carried through the trees, low and steady, echoing off the ravine walls. It was not a song of mourning. It was a promise. Later that evening, back aboard her ship, Mara sat alone at her desk. The years had slowed her body but sharpened her purpose. She opened a new log, her final one. "This is Commander Mara Voss," she began. "Intercultural Defense Initiative, Cathara Sector." Her voice was rough but steady. "To whoever reads this, human or otherwise, know this. Courage does not belong to a species. It belongs to choice. The moment you stand when running seems wiser, when fear tells you to look away, those are the moments that define what kind of being you are." She paused, watching the stars drift slowly past the viewport. "I've seen the worst of the galaxy. I've seen hatred dressed as heritage and cruelty called instinct. But I've also seen a child of predators risk his life for a human, and a human stand for those who were never hers to protect. That's what gives me hope." She leaned back, exhaling slowly. "If you ever find yourself outnumbered, outgunned, and alone, remember this. You don't need to be faster. You don't need to be stronger. You only need to stay standing one heartbeat longer than despair itself. That is what it means to be human. That is what it means to be alive." She ended the recording and sent it into the Coalition archive, where it would be preserved among the great histories of 1,000 worlds. Outside, Cathara IV glowed beneath her ship like a living ember, red forests, silver rivers, and the faint shimmer of life continuing where she once fell. She rose slowly, walking to the viewport, her reflection overlapping with the stars. The ceremonial KTH blade rested at her hip. Its edge had dulled with age, but its meaning had not. Behind her, a message blinked across her console, one of her officers reporting that a new generation of cadets had completed their training. Their final words in the ceremony had been hers: "We do not move." Mara smiled faintly. Then, in the quiet of her quarters, she whispered a single phrase to the stars, a promise she had carried for a lifetime. "Let them come. We'll stand." And on the world below, the wind stirred the crimson trees of the Heartwood Forest. Between the branches, the old cords tied by KTH cubs decades ago still swayed gently. They chimed together, softly, almost like voices. If one listened closely, it sounded like a vow echoing across time itself, gentle, eternal, unbroken. She did not move. They still tell her story, not because it's ancient, not because it's legend, but because it reminds us what humanity truly is. When the arrows fell like rain, Mara Voss didn't stand because she was fearless. She stood because she was human, because something in her heart said, not one step back. Across the stars, the KTH still sing her name before every mission. They touch their blades to the ground and whisper, "We do not move." Not in worship, not in grief, but in remembrance. And somewhere, far from Cathara IV, on ships crewed by a dozen species, humans still wear the same motto stitched to their sleeves. A reminder of what connects us all, not strength, not power, but empathy that refuses to yield. Maybe that's why her story never fades. Because we all need to believe that when the storm comes, when the sky darkens, when fear takes hold, someone will still choose to stand. And if no one else does, maybe that someone will be you. Because when the arrows fall like rain, humanity does not move.